Good morning, Ms. Chan, ladies and gentlemen. It is always a pleasure to be in Singapore again, and I'd like to thank the Energy Market Authority of Singapore for inviting me to speak at this inaugural Distinguished Speakers Program this morning. I will be sharing my thoughts with regards to the dynamics of the energy supply industry with respect to the countries in ASEAN, taking into consideration what we see happening around us at the present time. I know that in there it says Chairman Tenaga Nasional, but I will be speaking more in my personal capacity as a person who have fortunately been involved in the industry for a number of years. You know, there has been a great deal going on around the world today, which are worthy of our attention because of their profound impact on the dynamics of the energy and electricity supply industry. This is apart from the ongoing concern we all have with regard to the issues of climate change and global warming. We see flooding in Australia earlier this year, the ongoing instability in the Middle East and North Africa, the earthquake, tsunami, and the nuclear tragedy in Japan. It will be some years before we can fully recover from the effects of all these events. But what is clear, they will require adjustments in the way the industry carries on with its business. And among the very clear lesson we all learn is, of course, the reality of how globally and economically connected we have all become, and how profoundly vulnerable the industry is to what is happening in nature and the cross currents that is happening in terms of economics or social events around the world. The electricity supply industry of ASEAN, which serves as a backdrop of what I'm discussing today, faces multidimensional challenges in fulfilling the responsibility to deliver reasonable, affordable, and reliable electricity supply to consumers. We see one among the various matters is the depleting indigenous resources. We have all high demand growth, and we all require major investments, increasing and volatile fuel prices, and of course now increasingly vocal demands on meeting sustainable environmental question, as well as increasing sophistication in what consumers like to see in the industry. As far as the people in the industry is concerned, obviously this requires a very important need to be very prudent in the way they manage the utility, balancing all these conflicting pools that the dynamics require us to meet. Issues how to balance the demand of energy security, how to make sure that we then install infrastructure that is cost competitive, and how do we make sure that we fulfill the assurance of safety in order to make sure that people feel comforted and safe. For example, our green energy goals of reducing the level of carbon emission and mitigating climate change are much desired. However, the costs of available technology at the present time in green energy question remain prohibitively high. And also, current technology on renewable energy, as you know, is still very undependable in terms of security and in terms of stability of supply. Similarly, industrialization policy that encourages the growth of heavy industries for high economic growth is contrary to the objective of reducing carbon emission, as it is also contrary to our expectation of encouraging efficient use of energy. As many of you know, those tasked with framing a country's industrial policy obviously cannot ignore the impact such policy will have on the country's energy supply. And on the question of energy supply security, power plants require fuel to generate power, and therefore fuel supply security is very critical in ensuring the ability of a power utility to fulfill its responsibility. We are fortunate in ASEAN in that we are or may seem to be in a comfortable position with regard to the current position of supply security. The majority of countries of ASEAN utilize natural gas as the main source of electricity generation. For example, Brunei, Malaysia, Thailand, and Singapore are largely dependent now on natural gas for power generation. And natural gas is relatively abundant within the ASEAN region, with proven reserves of about 4% of global reserves. And in the North ASEAN region, encompassing the Mekong Basin, in particular the Lao People's Democratic Republic, Myanmar, and Vietnam, they derive their power from hydropower projects. Now, even though the role of renewable energy is still very small, countries in the region are beginning to tap into renewable energy in their generation mix. For example, geothermal for both Indonesia and the Philippines, biomass and geothermal in Thailand, and in Malaysia, we are also beginning to try and develop power plant using biomass fuel. But this level of comfort in energy supply security is, however, compromised, even in the short term, even as we speak, by the rising trend in energy prices that we are seeing now. What is clear is that there will be increased challenges in ensuring supply security in the longer term. Fuel supply security within the region resolves primarily around three fossil fuels: oil, gas, and coal. Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Vietnam are countries in the region with oil reserves at 1.1, 4.4, 5.5, and 4.5 thousand million barrels respectively. These reserves are, however, finite. They are fast depleting because of the high regional demand, as well as increasing demand to support export revenue. It is the same for gas. ASEAN have a proven reserve of 4%, and we are apparently accounting for some 6.6% of world's production of gas, and yet we are already seeing some strain in our gas supply. In Malaysia, for example, the development of natural gas is also further hampered in that it involves smaller fields containing carbon dioxide and the increase in exploration and production costs. In the case of coal, while the Asia-Pacific region is reported to have second largest proven reserve up to Europe and Eurasia. Most of the coal within the region is found in Indonesia, though there are smaller quantities in Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia in the state of Sarawak. And at the same time, Asia Pacific is also the largest consumer of coal. In addition, most of the coal produced and consumed within the region is of lower calorific value or lignite used at mine mouth plants within the region. The response adopted by individual countries in ASEAN to mitigate the risk of supply security is very much influenced by available resources in their respective countries. While most countries in ASEAN adopt a general policy of fuel diversification, there is, however, some focus on a dominant particular fuel choice, especially where such a resource is obtainable domestically. Some form of diversification is also seen in countries with adequate domestic resource, as we see in Brunei. They have substantial gas, but even in Brunei, is also examining the possible sourcing of future long-term capacity from Sarawak's hydropower projects. Similarly, Cambodia, the Lao People's Republic, Myanmar, and Vietnam, fortunately for them, they do have some hydro potential that they can utilize for the future. Indonesia's current high economic growth and demand means also high growth for power requirement. And in order to meet this demand, Indonesia is focusing on fast-track projects of coal-fired power plants and reinforcing the transmission network, including grid interconnection projects for energy transmission from coal-fired plants to load centers, as well as grid connection between its main islands. The Philippines also diversifying its generation mix. So does Thailand, which has formulated quite a comprehensive fuel diversification strategy ranging from renewable energy, fossil fuels, augmented by hydro imports from neighboring countries. I'm told by Ms. Chan last night that Singapore is increasing the use of natural gas in that they are already investing in building capacity for LNG imports. In Peninsular Malaysia, we now have 40% of our generation mix from coal, which is primarily sourced from Indonesia, Australia, and South Africa. So you can appreciate the risk of fuel supply is for us in Tenaga Nasional very challenging indeed. And in an effort to manage that risk, increased risk in fuel security, and in particular the worrying prospects of having too much coal in the generation mix, in Malaysia also we are investing in infrastructure for LNG imports as an alternative for gas from domestic supply. The facilities in Malacca is expected to be completed sometime in August next year.